Welcome to the How You Breathe is How You Live podcast. I'm your host, Jake Parent. Here's something I've been sitting with. Most of us think of healing as the destination, like if we just fix the wound, something good is waiting on the other side. But what if healing isn't the destination? What if it's just the toll booth? Today's a special episode. I'm joined by a guest and a friend, Richard Thomas. He's a licensed therapist, a breathwork facilitator, and he just spent 7 weeks pouring out a 300-page fantasy novel about the origins of St. Nicholas and the last stand of the pagan gods. Which sounds like a strange pivot until you realize the whole book is really about one question: what freezes us? And more importantly, what has the power to thaw it? That's where we're going today. Let's get into it. Richard, what part of you needed this story to exist?
I think the 15-year-old part of me. So when I was very young, I remember sitting after my parents would pull out the Christmas decorations. I'd be sitting with these, and I would just sit around and play with them. And there was this real dynamic, beautiful play that was happening, and I looked forward to it every year. And then as I got older, I loved to sketch, so I started drawing these characters, and it was this fantasy, this game, this play of my childhood. And then you become a man and you put away childish things, and then that went away and started working in all sorts of other realms. And then I realized I really did want to write books. So I've actually written 2 other books, but I've never published them. Each time I get close to publishing them, there's just a hard stop inside that says, nope. It's not the time. It's cool that it exists, but it's not the time. And so that happened recently, where I had just finished a book that is essentially an explicit telling of my psychological and spiritual approach to life and to healing. And I was very close. I mean, it's completely done, the manuscript, but there's just Spirit gave me like a hard stop. This is not happening right now.
Right.
And so I paused and I said, what am I going to do then? And all of a sudden there was this reality of, you get to write your Santa Claus story. I was like, what? I was very excited about it. So I sat down and wrote it in about 7 weeks, and it kind of poured out. And the fastest I've ever put anything on paper, and the most excited I've been about it. And I think it might be my best work so far. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, well, I have, I'd say I'm about a little over a third of the way through the book, and it's been very enjoyable. I've enjoyed it quite a bit. I do feel like it is on par with Neil Gaiman's American Gods, and that if you enjoyed American Gods, you would enjoy this book as well.
Yeah, it's such a compliment. Thank you, Jake.
You're welcome. So in the foreword that you stated, winter is the season when stories rise on their own. Why is it that stories seem to matter during difficult seasons?
It's not difficult. Maybe it's the calendar, right? So the medicine wheel is an idea that I play around a lot with. And, springtime, morning, new beginnings, we're starting a journey, we're excited about it. And then summertime is the time of noon, the sun is at its peak. And it's the time of our work and our dance and our play and our struggle and all the difficulties that we're working through. Mm-hmm. And then in autumn and in evening, we begin to settle a little bit and gather our nuts, so to speak. And we light the fire, and then as the sun sets and it becomes nighttime, it's not quite time for sleep yet, but it is time for stories. Mm-hmm. And winter is that nighttime for us. We lose track of those patterns, I think, but prior to modernity, that was exactly the pattern that every people on Earth, at least in these sorts of regions that we live in, they followed. And so the fire was about storytelling. And I think the stories were pretty much always about recollecting the journey that we just had in some symbolic form, some metaphor. It wasn't ever explicitly that. It's, these archetypes rise deep from the unconscious, but, it's time to kind of put it together, early winter. And then I think it is time for hibernation.
Right.
After that, we can rise in the springtime and do it all over again.
That you touched on there is that we've lost connection with those stories, the story season as part of modernity. But what do you think? You touch on this repeatedly in the book, that modern people have forgotten something important. So what do you think it is that modern people have forgotten?
Oh, my God. The answer that popped right out, and I have
We've
no
only got
idea
4
where
hours.
this is going.
Yeah.
It's their true name. I think that we as humans, we are meaning-making creatures. We have this capacity to think in terms of symbols, to make meaning, to take all of the beauty and difficulty and everything that's around us and weave it together into something whole. And I think a lot of our ancestors understood that. Many of them didn't. They were savages and they just wanted to bash people's heads in or whatever, right? Like there's lots of different, when I speak of ancestors.
We can be two things.
Yeah. So there was this beautiful capacity to make meaning, and that's really the human heritage. And I think that we've forgotten that. So when I say our true name, I think it's the heritage of what we are and what we can be and what we're evolved to be. And instead, we've gotten lost in these patterns of endless consumption and endless doing and endless trying to achieve. And in that, we've lost track of really who we are, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
We talk about a lot is identity, and that your identity is your destiny, and that a lot of what we're doing, a lot of what I'm trying to do with breathwork is connect people back to their original identity, which is part of their energy, like that we call it the energy self of who is it, are you really, before society, before mom and dad, before the church, before anybody else got involved, who are you? And once you make contact with that, life becomes a lot easier.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's not that life is easy, but easier. Yeah. Yeah,
when we're vibing in the way that we're supposed to, life's a little easier. If you're a giraffe and all you're doing is like eating the leaves on the bottom of the tree, you're going to get a crick in your neck. Life's it's not quite as easy.
That's a good one. So were there themes that appeared in the book before you consciously realized they were there?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, honestly, a lot of the book, I feel like it wrote itself. I knew the characters, I knew the general structure, but as I was writing, these scenes would just come into my mind, like almost fully formed, and I'd get really excited about them. And only as I was writing them did I realize like the deeper elements that were structured and woven into these scenes. It was a process that felt almost like reading my favorite book or watching my favorite movie, and then very, very quickly trying to put words to it,
Right.
And something inside me was like, oh yeah, I love that. But it actually did. Yeah, it took probably through the editing process sometimes to really realize. And I don't know that it's all been realized yet, but it's been a fun process of discovering these themes as I've learned the story.
It is. I think it's one of the beautiful things about story is that people can read the same story, have different takeaways, understand different themes, and it touches them in different ways, and maybe in ways that you didn't know when you wrote it that it was going to touch them, and that they're going to see it from their vantage point.
That's one of the things that's been interesting to me is that I've been pushing away from story. Sometimes in our professional lives, we're like, oh, I have something to say, so I need to say it in this very either scholastic or therapeutic way, right? I need to be an authority of some sort. And I honestly believe that's why my previous books I was not able to publish them, because I think whatever was inside of me needed to be humbled a little bit and say, no, you're not going to show up as an expert. You're going to show up as a storyteller.
Right.
And it's not even going to look like the kind of stuff that you normally think about or write about or whatever, but in that, your heart, your soul is going to be revealed in a much, much better way.
Showing up authentically is difficult.
Yeah.
That if people reject your expertise, you're like, all right, whatever, man, that's on you. But if they reject your authenticity, you're like, all right, now we're going to fight. At least that's my approach.
With some boxing gloves on.
Yeah. And you said there that you had given up on story for a while. So what is it about fiction that allows you to explore that therapy doesn't?
I was talking to a colleague the other day, and in the conversation, it came out that what we actually are, at least the kind of therapy that the two of us are practicing, are in a lot of ways, and we're weaving in the archetypes and the play and metaphor. I think it's that story allows you, what we said a few moments ago, right, that there's all of these layers and elements because it's symbolic, that you can just play in that sand for a little while. They're like toys in a sandbox, right?
Right.
And you can play in that for a while. Whereas if I'm doing an intervention, or if I am giving you homework, or we're working through a workbook, or some of the bullshit that a lot of mental health practices have become, if I'm doing that, it's very limited actually what we can achieve and accomplish. So I think story opens the world up a little bit and then allows people's minds to connect to the themes that are going to be meaningful and powerful to them.
Do you think the way that you do therapy, that you are helping people edit their stories so that they can have a better life? And is the storytelling and therapy akin to one another because you can change the ending of the story even if reality itself didn't change?
Yeah. One of the approaches that I take the most with clients, and for some of them it's a meme now, and they're like, I know, I'm in story mode, is that we are storytelling creatures whether we want to be or not. We're always telling a story, so we need to be aware of the nature of the story that we're telling. Is this a story that ultimately is going to help us, or is this a story that's going to cause damage? We don't have access to absolute truth, right? We don't have access to the world as it is.
Speak for yourself, but go on.
All right, I forget who I'm talking to.
I can't.
And so everything is just our version, right? Our story, our fiction. And so we may as well pick a good one. We may as well pick one that serves us and makes us feel happier and that we enjoy reading or talking about or living.
I think 3 things there. First is the dude from the Big Lebowski. Yeah, it's just your story, man.
Just like your opinion, man.
That's just like your opinion, man. And then I guess the second is that I ask people before they come into ceremony. I used to ask this a lot in the beginning. I don't ask it as much anymore. Is what is the myth of your life? What is the story that you were telling yourself about your life? Are you living a tragedy? I go, I'm living a rom-com action movie. I'm having a blast over here. But that story that you're telling yourself about your life, that the character that you are in your own story is foundational. And that I think, I wouldn't say when we talk about therapy and breath work, normally we talk about therapy as it is giving you a species of technique to address the world and to deal with the world. But it doesn't necessarily give you the capacity to execute on those techniques.
Yeah.
And I think breath work gives people the capacity, which is one of the things we talk about a lot, is nervous system capacity and having the strength emotionally and mentally to deal with things that your therapist can give you, like, hey, well, what you need to tell them is, hey, that's not an appropriate action and I don't appreciate that. But if you're like at a level 10, it's not going to come out that way. And I think the two work together wonderfully, that breath work can give you revelation, insights, and downloads, but it isn't always going to be the actual, hey, this is what you need to do and how you need to do it to be effective at this, of being more skillful and less skillful.
Yeah. Yeah, I think breathwork gives you kind of space to relax into whatever is going on. For me in breathwork, I don't think much. You know, there's just not a lot going on up there, but it's a regulation of that nervous system. It's a relaxation into something that is sacred and beautiful. And then when I come out of that space, I feel energized. And then, I have the momentum that I need to actually make positive change to the story that I'm telling.
Yeah, you're probably at a place in life where I think the healing journey should last 2 to 3 years. And that after that, what you're focused on is growth and development.
Yeah,
and
it's a good call.
And I'm not saying that as an absolute, hey, your results may vary. We've all, if you have a knee surgery and you haven't recovered in 6 weeks, we're like, hey, what's going on here?
Right.
But then there are other people who have an ankle injury and it's, I've been getting surgery for 5 years on this thing. And it's, all right, that makes sense.
Probably some extenuating factors there.
Some extenuating factors. So when I say 2 to 3 years, if your journey has been longer, my apologies, but you may have extenuating factors, or you may just be wallowing around in the victim archetype.
We may have to be in that story for a while.
Figure it out. And I think part of what that therapy and breathwork does, and this goes back to Plato, is that it feels less like learning and more like remembering. That I believe it was Plato said that all knowledge is remembering.
Yeah.
And reading your book, it was wonderful to remember some things.
Thank you.
So what part of you needed this story to exist?
The child in me needed this story to exist. The one that was filled with wonder and delight and excitement. As we go through our lives, and specifically as I've been going through my life recently, there's been a lot of change and a lot of upheaval and a lot of growth.
Nobody but you is experiencing that in 2026.
No.
I mean, it's just
me.
Yeah,
it's been a weird one.
Everybody else has it set on cruise control, and we're just sliding through on the year, man.
Yeah.
Sorry to hear your years.
It's been perfect. It's been wonderful. in those spaces of growth and, oh my God, I got to take more ownership, and oh, I'm doing that wrong too, and holy crap, it just got heavy. And I think I just got to a place of blah, right? I want to live a free, happy, light life, but I've been heavy.
Right.
I guess if you use the terminology of the book, I've been frozen.
Right.
It's just freezing up.
Right.
And so I think this book, for me, it's filled with wonder and delight, and it takes place in a very heavy world, right? A frozen world where, the villain's running around freezing people's hearts. And I think as I'm pondering on that, I think I was in that sort of place. So I think I needed a thaw a little bit.
Right.
And so I came to kind of a real dark moment late last year. And then when I had a moment to pause after that and take a few breaths, this story just poured out, and it was very healing. It got me very in touch with a lighter, more playful, less dragged down version of myself. So that's the part that wanted to have the story exist.
The part that wanted to play. Beautiful. One of the things that I've been focusing on recently is that we don't talk about this a lot on the podcast yet, but we'll get there eventually when it comes to manifesting abundance. One of the very important aspects of manifesting that most people miss, skip, nobody ever talks about, is lower the importance. And that the major model that we use here for self-awareness comes from internal family systems. And I've built upon that, and that they have their 8 C's. And they just talk about the 8 C's of the authentic self as if they just exist and they're a gunshot. And they're not. It's a progressive model. And in that progressive model, calm comes first, then comes self-connection, then comes clarity. Once you have clarity, now you can see what direction you need to move. Then you need courage to move. Once you have courage, you've taken action. That gives you confidence. Once you have confidence, that allows you to have compassion. And once you have compassion, that allows you to have curiosity. And then the final step of self-awareness is creativity, that you're able to be creative and generative once you've gone through all those steps, that you don't get to just start at creativity. I have the belief that creativity is a birthright, that we are all here to be generative at something and to be creative of something. In the work that you do, how many people do you think are carrying a book, a business, a dream, an idea, or a creative project inside of them that they never share?
Everyone. Yeah. Not everyone never shares, Yeah, it's a funny little dovetail. So again, another one, and maybe this is the result of writing the book, I don't know, but one of the big themes I've been working with people on lately is when you are in a lull, when you're in a space that feels dragged down and like you're not alive, you have to create silence and then call in something creative. And for me, anything will do as long as it's creative. You're either creating or consuming. I think when we're exclusively consuming, we're miserable.
It makes us lethargic.
Yeah.
That if you are just eating food, you feel lethargic. If you sit on TV or you sit on TikTok and you just bring in, you feel lethargy. If you just go out for a walk, you're like, oh, I feel better.
Yeah.
Or as Ryan Holiday likes to say, I've never felt worse after a walk.
So I think that's the reality. Anybody who's really struggling, even if they're, and I really like the model, the 8 C's and what you're working through. I think for me, the way that resonates is a little bit more in the way that the stages of it starts with denial and then bargaining and then anger and sadness and acceptance. And that model's been renegotiated the last few decades. And we see it more as like a path of multicolored stones, with these 5 colors or maybe a spiral, that we're going through these phases. And yes, they're connected to each other in a way. And once we kind of go around, we're going to get to a more intricate or more subtle level of that grief. And we're going to go through many of those phases again and again and again until we come to a place of full acceptance of reality as it is, right? So as you were going through those, I can absolutely see that connection. And also it feels like, sometimes maybe creativity is, and we're talking like basic creativity is a way of bringing in compassion or bringing in courage, right? But ultimately, to get to the truest expression of our souls, we're probably going to have to go through all of those first.
And we do view it as a spiral, that when you get to the end, you just begin again.
Keep on going.
That your problems, your challenges in life are always going to be your challenges. There's never any point where you're like, well, dusted my hands of that. I don't ever have to deal with fear or anxiety again. And for me, anger and impatience, that will be my lifelong struggle. Now I will struggle with it, hopefully at a higher level and to a lesser degree, that it does become more refined, but it just does keep coming around. It's like, as the Buddha said, Mara, there you are again, my old friend. I see you visited me again. Thank you. Why is it easier to imagine creating something than actually creating it? And what keeps people from beginning?
Well, we've been consuming so much. We're having enough energy to get on that path, I think slows people down a lot.
Do it?
Oh, man, I got a stomachache. I can't go for a hike right now.
Right.
I think that's a big part of it. Sometimes, though, I think that the ancients talked about having a genius. And that genius was something that came and went, and we could certainly cultivate a life that encouraged the genius to stay with us longer. The genius being the creative inspiration.
The muse,
the muse.
That in the old times, genius was not an IQ you possessed, but a gift that was visited upon you.
An entity of some sort. And so you wanted to cultivate a life that encouraged that genius to stick around. And the reality is, I think we don't have those lives.
Right.
Our culture, the world that we live in, is 100% antagonistic to inviting the genius to stick around. And so, even though we have these beautifully creative minds that as children, see, the thing about it, children they're not embedded in that culture. They're embedded in the culture of whatever home life is, or hopefully in a beautiful situation of parents who love them. Or at least they're in an imaginary world, and they can play and invent and do the things spontaneously that they're supposed to do in that realm. But then, whether it's at 3 years old through abuse, or whether it's at 18 when we leave home, the world hits us in the face, and I think our capacity to believe that we can be a home for genius, it goes away. And so I see, it's the craziest thing. You see people just wilt as adulthood arrives, and as the responsibilities of adulthood arrives, and something in them realizes, oh, I see. I have to actually be stuck in the shit. I can't be who I always wanted to be, or have the career that I wanted, or create what I wanted to. So the light goes out of their eyes. It's a real bummer.
Right.
So I think we have to revive that child, and we have to do it by creating in us an environment that child can thrive in, because that's our creative.
I think there's no greater devastation of the creativity and the genius of childhood than our school system.
Oh, yeah. Can I tell an anecdote real quick?
Please do. We're here for the stories.
So when I lived in Japan for a little while, I was teaching English to young children. And it was the most interesting thing, because we had preschoolers all the way through high schoolers. And the little children, the younger ones, would just run around. They were just raucous little things. They'd come up around, and they had this thing in Japan where they'd go, "Concho," and they'd stick their fingers in your butt. Like, it was the weirdest thing, but it was like part of their thing, and they just thought it was so funny, and they ran on and whatever, and they were just little monsters, but it was great. It was so fun. And they learned so fast. We'd teach them English, and they're like, "Oh, hello, Reiko-sensei." It was really sweet. And then right around 8th grade, something shifted in them, and you just saw them go. One time I asked a Japanese coworker, I said, "What happens between 7th and 8th grade that causes them to lose their heart, their adventure, their life?" And she said, "Oh, they're going through testing right now, and that testing will determine their career path. And so a lot of pressure is put on them for that testing. But what that is essentially," and I said, "What do you mean their career path?" And she's like, "Well, some of them will get to go to medical school, or some of them will get to be professional. Some of them will just go to kind of blue collar work, or maybe they'll be, I don't know, a janitor or something. And, we're not going to waste our money on children who don't have the capacity to succeed." So they're told, 7th, 8th grade, you don't have the capacity to be something more than XYZ.
Right.
And that kills them. But then other ones are told, you have so much capacity to be exactly what I want you to be. And then that kills them. They're just squashed. So yeah, talking about an oppressive school system, but I think that's probably universal. It's more explicit in that story, but universally in our system, it's the same thing. We're going to put you through these exact classes, these exact curriculums that we believe are important. Everything else that we don't believe important, we're going to leave out And if you want to do that, you can elect that or something. It's fine. Enjoy yourself, whatever.
Right.
But here's what matters. And so we're like, oh, I guess that's what matters, right? And so we just zombify. You're absolutely right.
I remember being in the 4th grade and getting in trouble because I was taking too long to do my vocabulary words with the dictionary. This was back in the old days, kids, when you actually had to go to a dictionary with pages and a cover and flip through it alphabetically and look words up. I was taking too long because I would see words I didn't know, and I would read those words as well. And I was taking too long doing that, so I was being scolded for it. And I remember in the 4th grade thinking, you're an idiot. Like, I could not think any less of my 4th grade teacher than I did because of that. Writing a book is a difficult thing. I'm sure many authors have said this. I like having written. I don't like writing. And staring at the blank page can be quite difficult. It doesn't sound like you had that problem with this book, which is mazel tov to you.
Yeah.
Because I've certainly stared at the blank page a few times myself and thought, well, what are we going to say about this today, Brain? And Brain said, nothing. That's what we're going to say. I was like, all right.
Say it today.
We're just going to sit here and look at this page then for the next 30 minutes, bud. But for years, I started this podcast about a year ago. I've been doing this for about 9 years. So for 8 years, I probably wrote somewhere between 5,000 to 10,000 words per week on breathwork and never published any of it about different things. But it was me. A lot of it was me just trying to figure out what was happening.
Yeah.
Like, why does breathwork reduce stress? Why are people having this experience? What is going on? What are the first principles of why this works? And then once I figured out the first principles, I figured out the analogies of how to convey this, and then told no one. And other than personal conversations or in coaching calls, that it is difficult to make something that is private become public, to share your thoughts. Difficult. This podcast was largely my exercise, and I actually have to create this and put it into the world and not just leave it on my hard drive. Yeah. So why is it so uncomfortable for people to be seen?
Jake, if we're seen, we can be rejected. But if we're not
seen, we can never be accepted either. That many people are surrounded by throngs of people.
Yeah.
And they still feel lonely because nobody actually sees them. And it is an epidemic in our society of people who are completely lonely while surrounded by people who...
100%. I gave a snarky answer. That was the logic, I think, that was for the longest time. 2 years ago, my wife made me a TikTok account. And she said, what I want you to do is I just want you to have your phone by your chair, and once you drop a wisdom bomb in the end of session, I want you to just grab your phone and just record that wisdom bomb as a TikTok, and it'll take 2.5 minutes total, start to finish, and then you'll have the best content for TikTok ever. And I thought, that sounds like a terrible idea. You've taken away all of my excuses for why I can't do it. Right. So I didn't do anything until about 2 weeks ago. Yeah, I got to figure out social media anyway. Let's just do it. And so I put a few on there, and it was the strangest thing. I actually didn't care if anybody liked it. I didn't care if anybody saw it. I didn't care if there was any support coming in.
You lowered the importance.
It actually felt just good to get it out. It felt like taking a nice shit.
Yeah.
And so I think that also in this publication process, it's been the same thing. Like I said, I'd written 2 books, and I don't think I had it in me just yet to deal with, here's my soul. What you going to do with it, everybody? I think I had to, and that was, again, the first book was a book about Jesus, which is a very complicated subject for everyone. And then the second book was...
Nobody gets upset about that.
Yeah, nobody, never. There's no controversy.
And neither of us have any opinions about that deviate from right down the middle of the norm that everybody accepts. Yeah.
Yeah, my Jesus is not the one who's going to be sold in the Christian bookstores. But he's awesome. Anyway, the next one was my personal philosophy and spiritual approach to life. And yeah, I think having those, I think I couldn't decrease the level of importance, like you'd said earlier, right? If I'm showing up with a fun little tale about Santa, it feels a lot different to me.
Yeah.
And in that, I was actually able to express my soul probably better than the previous 2 attempts.
Beautiful. I have spent a lifetime being a good public speaker. My first public talk was at age 5 public. My skill set on camera is not only is it non-existent, it is at negative levels. When I first appeared on camera, it was terrible. I remember showing the videos to Kim, and she's like, what happened here? What is this dog crap? And I'm like, yeah, I need some practice.
Yeah.
And every day for a year, I would go on a walk and think about things, which is where I think. And I would come home and record a video for 3 minutes, and it was terrible. And then I started recording this podcast, and it was mediocre at best. We're at episode 48. It's now starting to bode well for me. That part of it is doing the reps and mastering the skill. In breathwork, we often see that the body experiences visibility as a threat. Do you see that same thing in therapy?
The body experiences visibility. Let me think about it for a second.
I can tell you evolutionarily why that is. Why we're terrified.
Because I want to have a good response.
So the reason that we are terrified of public speaking from a evolutionary reason is that the only time that you are going to have to speak publicly is if you were in front of the tribe defending yourself. And are we going to expel you or are we going to kill you? And otherwise, there was no reason for you to get up and speak in public.
Yeah, because you weren't an individual prior to that.
Correct. You were a member of a tribe.
Yeah. And prior to that, we were a member of a troop.
Yeah.
It's interesting because individuality is a valued element of what we see in this modern experience, right? Well, I'm an individual. But yeah, the reality is I don't think we're the only species, I think. I don't know, this might be bullshit, but evolutionarily, it seems to me that we are the individuals who believe ourselves to be, or the species that believe ourselves to be individuals, right? And so, yeah, there's nothing more individual than saying, hey, this is who I am, this is what I am, and this is what matters to me, and I'm putting it out there. That's a scary thing. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think so therapy for me always comes back to story. Stories of the people that show up in my space. And, generally speaking, I think I get a lot of pretty healthy people who want to become healthier. But even still, the stories are often ones of, well, this is how I've been wounded, and this is how I have tried my hardest, and it just hasn't worked out. They're pretty dark stories, pretty depressing stories. I just don't think in those spaces they really have the capacity to let themselves be seen. They're telling a real bummer of an individual tale. So that matches very much, that dovetails with the evolutionary thing of like, well, something's wrong here. It's not a safe place. Your story is not one that's happy. Why would you want to get up and be seen?
Right.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So I think when you talk about being an individual, is that, solitary confinement for a reason. That we don't like being cut off from other people. And that when we talk about fulfillment is doing work that fills you with energy that other people appreciate. And that it has to entail both parts. It has to be work that fills you with energy and that other people, I use playing video games as an example, it may fill you with energy, but nobody else is really that appreciative of.
No one's impressed with your score.
Yes, there are a very small number of people who are video game influencers.
Yes.
The chances that you're going to be that person are very slim. That is a personality job, not necessarily a gaming job. So that exists, but probably not for you. So that even in the individuation of our creation, other people need to appreciate our creativity and what we're producing in the world. And I often use the example of being in a symphony that you need to play your instrument, you need to play it to the best of your ability, and you need to play it cohesively with the rest of the group. There may be times when it's time for you to solo.
Yeah.
And it's, hey, it's your turn to solo. Yeah, I'd rather not. And those people, lovely as they are, quite a bit better than the people who are constantly trying to fight their way to the front of the stage.
So if we play with that evolutionary concept that you're bringing up, I think that's why it's so hard to put our stuff out there, because it's requiring us to be individuals. When again, evolutionarily, we don't want to. So it feels very much like we're on the chopping block.
Yes.
And in a world with so much product, right? So much, and probably too much, where, we shouldn't be consuming so much, we should be creating, right? And in that world, it feels so scary to say, okay, well, here's my product, here's the thing that is me. And on some level, are we going to ostracize you, or are we going to kill you?
Right.
Certainly, you're not going to make a positive influence. I think that really resonated with me when you were saying that, on why it's so hard to put your stuff out there. So yeah, I think it's absolutely true that we have to just let go of the importance of it and just realize It's not about how many people read or listen or whatever. It's about the fact that we are creative beings, whether we want to be or not. And as Carol and Casey said, we're either creating melodrama in our life or we're creating art.
Right.
Figure it out.
Those could be. Two things can be.
Yeah.
True. So creation requires imagination, publishing requires courage, and promotion requires self-worth. Hopefully that didn't take too much damage on that.
I'm feeling really good about myself lately, Jake.
Good. We talk about in Breathwork. The answer isn't missing, that access is. That everything you need is within you, and a fuse got popped or a circuit breaker got flipped, and once we flip that back, you've restored access, and that once you have that access, now you can begin to be generative and creative and live a life of fulfillment. Does that sound accurate to you?
Sounds absolutely accurate. We've got one. I think you said that beautifully. I'm going to steal it.
Just to direct them to the podcast.
Yeah.
We are desperately trying to go viral. So can someone feel deeply creative while still in survival mode?
Yeah. Actually, I've seen a number of people. And sometimes, and this is kind of where I was bringing a different level to the 8 Cs. Sometimes a client comes to mind who was in their dark night of the soul, the deepest, darkest spot they'd been in probably ever. And I'd been working with them for a while to get them out of that. And I was encouraging, whatever their creative art was. And for them, it was painting. I was like, oh, great. I would love to see your paintings. Come here, I've got it on my phone. So they show me their paintings, and they are dark. They are like just dark swaths of like harsh lines. And I was like, well, yeah, wow, these are, they're pretty good. I said, so I wonder if there's a color in there. And that was all I said, right? So they started putting a color. They started putting blue in. And over the next few weeks, the paintings, they lightened just a little. They weren't suddenly rainbows and butterflies, but there was just a little light in there. And within about a month, they had completely pulled out of it. They'd gotten into a really beautiful relationship. They'd settled into the new reality, the new normal of their life. And within a few months after that, they were done with therapy. And I honestly do believe that even though their creativity was rough in that space, it was that product, that process of getting it out of their system. Like you said earlier, what part of you, right? Getting that out and feeding a part of them that needed to be fed from themselves rather than from the external environment, that really allowed them to heal. So yeah, I think the creativity can be there. It's not going to be their best work by any means, but I think it certainly can be there. I think of a lot of the the real tortured artists, right? That Van Gogh or whoever, who are making these beautiful pieces, this real composition, but they're in deep struggle as well. Yeah.
The only reason that Van Gogh became famous was because of his sister-in-law.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
What was going on with that?
Well, you talk about story. Van Gogh's brother basically paid Van Gogh to paint and then send him his paintings and didn't sell anything. And the reason that we know Van Gogh's story is because his brother's wife took the art, put it in a book, wrote the story of the picture, and then sold the book. And it was in the selling of the book that the art's.
Wow.
So it was only through his stories of suffering after he was gone. Yeah.
It seems like.
So that is the power of story.
But there's a resonance there still, right?
Yes.
There's a resonance.
Yeah, they were true stories.
Yeah.
But hey, I lived through when this picture was created. I know for me, recently, I don't have many rough patches in life. Like as an adult, I seem to skim through pretty easily. And, at the beginning of the year, I had a particularly rough patch. And life was not going well. I was deeply upset, deeply conflicted. And the only time that I was happy is when I sat down to create. When I was sitting down to write, when I was sitting down to do things, all of my problems would disappear. And I'd be like, whew. Yeah. If this is why people become workaholics, I understand why. I am just going to throw myself into my work because this is much better than dealing with that other bull crap in my life.
Work is beautiful.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. In this process of writing this book, it's been really, really interesting because my wife has been, really, she's very supportive of wanting me to be able to pull this out. And we have a bunch of kids and a bunch of responsibilities and, those sorts of things. And so she's kind of guarded me a little bit and said, no, I know you need to create. I know you need this. But the reality, and this is where it's gotten kind of weird for me, is I'm spending 8 or 9 hours a day at the day job, and then probably 4 or 5 hours. Now it's creating art for the campaign. But prior to that, it was the writing and the editing and all the things. And I honestly think I'm showing up better as a husband and a father, and probably not as a friend, But in other ways,
I think we're fine. My annual check-in.
okay. I think in a lot of ways I'm showing up a lot better because the process of creativity is actually really bringing a vibrance and a joy to my life that then I think is going out into other.
That's a good point. Do you think creativity is the natural state of a healthy human being?
I really do. I really do. I think it's our fundamental state because it's that child state.
So being a therapist, we touched on this briefly earlier. I shared my opinion. At what point does healing stop being the goal?
Yeah, it's a real obvious transition.
Is it?
Yeah, you see it. You see it when suddenly whatever they've restored themselves to a place where they're walking in authenticity. Not 100% of the time, not fully manifesting their highest version of whoever they are, but they're authentic. And they have access again to joy. I think it's a really good question because so many people are like, oh, I'm on my healing journey or blah, 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 blah. I actually think you and I probably know some mutual people who we've seen their healing journey and we're actually seeing a transition from a place of, oh yeah, they're not doing to a place of, actually, no, this is what they're supposed to be, right? It's really beautiful. And for me, it's become pretty obvious and apparent. And I always get a little sad about that because that means my folks are going away.
Right.
And I really love their relationship at those,
Hey, come back once a month so we can catch up.
That's why one of my mottos is I like to help healthy people become healthier because then it's not about healing. It's about, what was the word you used? Growth. Yeah. Growth.
Yeah, there's growth and transformation that I don't believe in. I don't believe in change. The world will change. Your circumstances will change. You never change.
No.
As much as the mulberry bush prays to be an oak, it'll always be a mulberry bush. You may be a richer, greener, more vibrant mulberry bush.
More fruitful,
but you're never going to produce acorns.
Right.
And my guide for healing is, are you in pain? You're not in pain? Healing's over. Get out there, kid. It's time to perform now.
Yeah. And again, we go through patches where we need healing, and it might not take years. It might take a couple months. We might have just, like you mentioned earlier this year, it sounded like you need a little healing.
Yes.
And then you got through it, and you got to maybe to a place of.
Yeah, we all suffer owies. You need a Band-Aid for a minute. Let's put that on there, and then
it's a much better approach. Than,
let's not put our superhero Band-Aid on our thumb, then wear it around like a badge of honor for the next 10 years.
One of the most ironic things to me is spiritual community and the healing community have become the same thing in so much of these spaces in America specifically. And I just think it's crazy. Right? The people who are wounded and they have owies and they're bleeding are like, I'm very spiritual. Maybe they're different things, right? Maybe healing isn't the spiritual path. It's a medicinal path. And from that point, then you get to manifest into the most beautiful spiritual being that you are. Right. But let's not get the ideas crossed and confused.
Well, what is spirituality?
Yeah, that's a good question. Breath. You like that answer?
Not really.
I know. Do you want the answer? Do you want my?
Sure.
Okay. I think.
If not, I'm going to have to labor the audience with mine again. So.
Okay. So I joked about breath, but I really actually do think that at the core of all of the spiritual traditions, the ancient ones, there always is a breathwork practice. That the ancient languages, for most of them, the word for spirit is the same for wind, airflow,
Pneuma. Yes.
That the Holy Spirit comes into your life when you're
Inspiration,
born.
respiration.
Yeah. And then you expire and the Spirit leaves your life. So from that, though, if that's accurate, I think spirituality is actually tapping into life, right? Really allowing yourself to fully, because breath is life. And so as I think your thing is you breathe, as you live like you breathe, or you breathe like
you breathe is how you live.
How you breathe is how you live, yeah. So I think that's what spirituality is, coming to a place of fully living life and not just buying. What makes someone spiritual versus, I don't know, temporal or physical or whatever. I think most of our culture, our society is around and selling us a false, maybe two-dimensional version of what reality is. But life is all of the dimensions, all of the pain, all of the difficulty, all of the beauty, all of the ecstasy, all of it. And so that's what spirituality is. It's an exploration into a lot of the elements and dimensions of life that we don't normally have access to because we're just locked in whatever our job is or whatever our responsibility is or whatever we're told it should be important to us.
I think that's really good. And the way that I've defined spirituality, so it'll be the broadest audience possible, I think what we've talked about before is that I had said something to the effect of like the audience that I want is not the super spiritual crystal clutchers, chakra wielding, tarot dealing people. Like, that's not who I'm looking for in my studio. And you're like, yeah, that's good. And then you immediately replied with, you don't want the militant atheists either. And I was like, you are correct. I do not. I'm looking for the largest swath of people in the middle who I don't care what their religious beliefs are. So the way that I've defined spirituality to include as many people as possible is that it is an energy that connects your energy to the larger energy of the all. And whatever lever you use to get there, whether it's cancer or your church or some other cause that you're believing in that connects you to the larger energy of the universe, that allows your energy to become part of that, that you are the drop of love in the ocean of love. You are the ocean and the drop all at the same time. That is spirituality. Yeah.
That's one of the things that impresses me about you is you're reading the definitions of the words you're not supposed to read. But I think that's always been something that as long as I've known you, you've been able to put a definition on something that you go, oh yeah, that works. That feels satisfying.
So at the age of 14, reading The Republic and discovering that men of gold were courage, temperance, wisdom, and justice, and those were the values that made men of gold, I was like, by jinky, I'll be a man of gold. And those were my core values, and I stuck with it. And recently I've been trying to swap out justice for compassion because I think I became a little over-tuned on.
A little overjust.
Yeah, a little overjust. Let's tone that down a little bit there, Chief. Yeah. But wisdom was difficult. What is wisdom? And I sat with that question for 30 years because when you look it up in the dictionary, this is terrible.
Not it.
This is not it. Yeah. And my I'm seeking understanding so that I can convey it to others because that their definition of it did not make any sense. And it's like, well, I know it when I see it. And wisdom is knowing what to do. In the sense of, I have gotten to the end of the road. There is no more path. There is no more guidebook. There's no instruction manual. Nobody's been here before. What do I do? And when you know, you have wisdom.
How do you know?
Because you have wisdom.
And how do we have wisdom?
Through spirit and energy.
Yeah. You know how I think wisdom comes?
Wishing?
If I may.
Sure.
So one of the stories that has influenced me the most is the story of the Gnostic fall of Sophia.
Okay.
Are you familiar with that one?
I am, but please tell the audience.
In the Apocryphon of John, which is a book that was found in the 1940s in the Egyptian desert, having been dug up by a farmer after it was buried centuries ago, probably around the Nicene Creed.
The Nag Hammadi scrolls.
Yeah, the Nag Hammadi scrolls. So in the Apocryphon of John, they tell this story about how there's the one, and then the one emanates all of these beautiful, wonderful realities, and this is God. And the youngest emanation was this character named Sophia, who is the feminine, and she was, that means wisdom in Greek.
Sophisticated. Yes.
So sophisticated.
That is the root word for.
Yeah. So Sophia she's just super stoked about existing and wants to worship the one and show the one just how grateful she is just to be here. So she says, I know what I'll do. I will create like a facsimile of the one and all of these emanations, but I'm going to do it on my own. It's almost like a little kid doing an art project so that they can go show mommy and dad and say, look what I did. Isn't that great?
Put this on the fridge.
Yeah, exactly. Put this on the fridge. So this is what she does. And she creates without her creation partner, who was Logos, or understanding. Okay?
In 1 John, it would be, in the beginning was the Word, which was actually Logos, which is understanding, or the point.
Yeah, the point. The
reason.
Yeah, the reason. So she's creating without reason. And in the Bible, in the Old Testament, they talk a lot about wisdom and folly, and they're these basically two sides of the same coin, probably dating back to the early Sophia traditions, right? That we actually have to have folly first. So Sophia's creation is just a goddamn mess. There's just monsters and terrors and demons. The Archon, right? The architect, the blind architect who looks around and doesn't see anything else because he's blind, and so he starts creating everything in his own blind-ass image. And it's just all of the troubles and terrors that could be, and that manifested into the human condition. And not only that, but then they looked around and all that they realized was Sophia, was wisdom, and so they just attacked her, and she became diffused into all of this terrible creation, and now it's just folly. And so then she's real bummed. So she asks the one, "Hey, can you help me out here? I'm a little stuck." And so the one sends Logos and says, "Hey, go rescue your creative partner. She's really struggling." And so understanding comes in and says, "Hey, check it out. We're good." And then Sophia kind of wakes up and she goes, "Oh shit." I get it now. And that's kind of, for them, that was the redemptive process, is how does wisdom and understanding come together to create a true comprehension of life as it is, right? And so where does wisdom, for me, wisdom comes from all of the mistakes, all of the struggles, all of the times that we fuck it up. And it may be well-intended, right? But we're just little children who want our shit on the fridge. And then we go, man, I really messed up. I need to figure this one out. I need to understand it a little bit better. And through a lifetime, and this is why at 14, maybe you were committed to wisdom, but you couldn't understand it because you hadn't lived the life yet. You hadn't made the mistakes and really fought in that arena just yet. And now on the other end, I think we get to really dive into a place of like, I think I understand this just a little better. I think there's some wisdom.
I think I'm going to agree and disagree in that, one, thank you for sharing the story of Sophia, and that, two, you do need experience, you do need understanding, but we've also had enough experiences in life where we have received revelation, insight, guidance, intuition on things that we don't know anything about, and been right in ways in which we shouldn't have been right.
There's just innate understanding there.
Innate understanding. Yeah. And I think everybody has some species of technique where they have that ability in their life, if they'll just listen to it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
So maybe some wisdom is inborn and maybe some...
Completely.
Cool.
Yeah, I would agree with that entirely.
Like that.
So one of the central themes of the book is that warmth transforms what has become frozen. So what do you think frozen means psychologically? What freezes people?
So in the book, character who's essentially a fallen elf has two goals. One goal is to separate their dreams, and the other is to freeze their hearts. And the reality is that the two goals dovetail into the same space, that when our hearts are frozen, we are separated from our dreams. And that's what I think freezes us, is we lose sight of whatever that inner vision is that we're born with. Maybe that's the innate wisdom that you're talking about, our genius. We lose sight of that, and life becomes gray and meaningless for so many people. So the separation from our dreams is the short answer.
I think when you talk about Father Frost becoming the villain as a fallen angel, and that in the story, he originally has a divine purpose. And he takes his divine purpose and makes it all about himself. And becomes very egocentric of, my role is the most important role. I was supposed to play the triangle in the symphony, but now I am going to take center stage with my triangle and drown everybody else out with it.
More cowbell.
More cowbell. Exactly. And that, I would say none of us wants to be the villain, but I generally don't mind being the villain if it serves a greater purpose. That a lot of times when people become the villain in life, it's because of their egocentricity and the focus on self and me. And some of that me is because they have a wound and they're trying to heal.
Yeah.
And that's sometimes. And then other times I think there's people who are just don't ever care about anybody else, that they have that innate clutching. Life happens on a complete spectrum, and some people are just more selfish than others, more self-centered. And healing them isn't going to cure that.
In the story, so Jack Frost, his fall happens for an interesting reason. He has this daughter. So he's order, he's organization, he's
the masculine.
Yeah, the masculine, freezing
order,
essentially. Yep.
Yeah.
And he has with light, with energy, the goddess Lucia. She's the Saint Lucia that's celebrated in Scandinavia. But the echo of her is in the story as this goddess of light. They have a child who is, so it's the child of light and frost. And she falls in love with humanity. Humanity just becomes fascinating to her, and she just thinks it's really, really cool. And the more she goes into the places that the humans are, their messiness and their difficulty and their brevity, the more anxious he gets. He gets very scared that he's going to lose her because she's going to be tainted by the disease of humanity. And so he in his fear he tries to pull her out and wounds her, and ultimately that's what causes his fall. Is essentially he's trying to control this daughter that he loves so much, and in doing so, causes harm. And for me, there was a lot of echoes of what the masculine is in that little game, that little archetype. I think that for so many of us, that's what happens, is we get scared we're going to lose something that we value, maybe the things that we value the most. And we're going to lose our life. We're going to lose our relationship. We're going to lose all of it.
We're all building sand castles in the sky.
Exactly. So I think this is what freezes us ultimately, is we're trying to control the things that ultimately we cannot control. So we're trying to just freeze it up. If it can just stay like it is, then we won't lose it. Right? Mm-hmm. It's an inability to accept loss that really freezes our hearts and causes us to stop dreaming.
That is an episode or two of the podcast. I did a short little bit about how when we have something that's pleasurable, we cling to it and hope it's never going to end. And when something unpleasant happens, we push it away like it's also never going to end. And both positions are ridiculous.
Yeah.
But it's going to transition from one to the other. We began this episode with a fantasy story about winter folklore. And we end it with the universal human question, what have we forgotten? And more importantly, what becomes possible when we finally remember? In his classic exploration of the winter cold, William Shakespeare wrote, "Blow, blow, thou winter wind, thou art not so unkind as man's ingratitude. Tooth is not so keen, because thou art not seen, although thy breath be rude." We live in a world where it's easy for the heart to freeze up, to let fear, control, and heavy responsibilities of adulthood extinguish the childlike wonder and true identity we were born with. We try to freeze reality in place because we're terrified of loss, forgetting that trying to control the weather only isolates us in the cold. Shakespeare continues, "Freeze, freeze, thou bitter sky, thou dost not bite so nigh, as benefits forgot. Though thou the waters warp, the sting is not so sharp, as friends remember not." The external winter isn't the threat. The real bite comes when we forget who we are, when we forget each other, and when we stop gathering around the fire to tell the stories that matter. Kindness is a fire. Creativity is our birthright. And your breath is the constant living warmth reminding your nervous system that you are safe enough to thaw, safe enough to play, and safe enough to step back into the light. Stop holding your breath against the storm. Reclaim your true name. Gather around the fire, build your art, and remember who you were all along. How you breathe is how you live. Take a big, warm, thawing breath.